Alright, I'm going to be ranking the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. Give you my little backstory with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I never watched a single one until the remake came out. And then ever since then, I've kind of been finding my way through them all. Here, I'm going to do a ranking. So don't forget to comment down below what your ranking is, and you can tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong, which you agree and don't agree. But let's jump right into this. So, coming in at number 9 for me is Leatherface from 2017. This movie to me is the one that does not feel like a Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie whatsoever. And it's the one that kind of tries to do like a whodunit, but overall I think it fails. And one of the biggest cons in this movie for me is the fact that you're following around these group of people to try to figure out, who's going to be Leatherface? And the person who looks like it's going to be Leatherface, the red herring, is so obvious that it's not him because he looks like him that I feel like it would have been better if they would have just fell right into it and that guy was Leatherface. It's even fitting. Because the person who we wind up on this journey with as Leatherface winds up being this character who seems caring, which I know Leatherface is always trying to do whatever he needs to for his family. That's kind of a caring side of him. But Leatherface also kind of grunts. He makes noises. He's not all mentally there. And in this movie, the character just talks, says full lines and everything else. And it just doesn't feel like this person would ever really truly become Leatherface. So to me, it was the most egregious version of the character that we've gotten, and the one that doesn't seem to be fitting it at all. That is why number 9 is Leatherface. Number 8, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. So this is your paint-by-number slasher in a sense, but it does do some things that I find to be extremely offensive. First of all, when the movie kicks off, you're at a house that does its best to look like the original house. But we have Bill Moseley back for another character role in this series, and him and his family are stored up inside this house. But when the original movie ends, which it goes to show you all this stuff from the original movie, the only characters in that room are Leatherface, 2 other people, the chef and then the crazy guy, I always forget his name, and Grandpa. And when this movie kicks off, the house is filled with like 20 people from this family. And it ends up being this giant shootout, and much of the Sawyer family dies. But somebody steals a baby, and then later on, we're going to now follow this baby. And the movie's supposed to take place in the 90s, I believe, because she's like 25 years old, so maybe you can hit late 90s. But the problem with this is the girl who plays her is like in her 20s, but they don't have elements from the 90s in it. So she's either the best looking 40-year-old you've ever seen in your life, or this is a different era of the 90s that none of us got to live in, because we get Trey Songz music in here. Wasn't out in the 90s. We get cell phones that aren't out in the 90s, so it doesn't add up. But that part is only part of the reason why this movie is so low on this ranking. The other part is the 3D effects don't age very well. They don't look terrible, but my biggest issue is the blood in 3D movies for horror is generally just looks off and different. It's a different color for it to be able to show this in the 3D. So the kills, you get some decent ones, but there's nothing spectacular. And the blood looks fake. And then some of the kills are so CGI'd to death that it just looks atrocious. Like, my wife walked in while I was watching this again, and she was like, "Oh, special effects, I give it a D-." And she literally watched one kill. She doesn't watch as much horror as I do to see how bad special effects can get, but she does watch quite a bit of horror with me, and she was just like, "God, that looks terrible." So it's not just me who was ashamed at how bad those effects looked for it being, I think, 2012. But then you also get the cringiness of the movie where Leatherface is now kind of the anti-hero. He's the Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon, because this whole town is against him. Evil dies tonight. Evil dies tonight. And they're trying to like take him out and he's supposed to be sympathetic here, but it's kind of be sympathetic with a character who brutally murders people and then they eat them. Kind of a mismatch there. And then you get these very, very cringy lines where the girl at the end is like, "It's because I'm a Sawyer." It's like, yeah, you've known that for like a week. So what the fuck are you talking about? And then she kicks a chainsaw or throws the chainsaw over to Leatherface and is like, "Do your thing, cuz." It's like, what? Do your thing, cuz. It's just shit. That's why it falls into number 8 for me. Alright, so number 7. Let's move it along a little bit quicker. This is going to be Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And this one's going to fall in here because this is a generic paint-by-numbers slasher movie. It doesn't offend me with anything, but it also doesn't really do anything good. The acting in it is fine. The storyline in it is very bland. There's not a whole lot that goes on with this movie, and it's extremely forgettable. I sat through and rewatched every single movie in this series before doing this ranking. And this was the one that, when I was writing down what was this movie about, this was the one that was the hardest to remember what this movie was about. It was very, very boring. It was like a slog to get through. So therefore it falls at 7 because it doesn't do anything that offends me like the first 9 and 8 did for me. But it also doesn't do anything memorable at all. Alright, so coming in at number 6. And this is where you guys can give me the hate in the comments if you want. I know this is a terrible, terrible fucking movie. And that's Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. But bear with me. Just listen. This movie is so damn bad that it's good. This is probably the most hysterical movie in the entire franchise. And not by choice. It's just that damn bad. Think of watching M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening. Remember that scene where you got to watch Mark Wahlberg talk to a tree? And some of you hated it, while most of us laughed our asses off at just how stupid it was? That's this whole movie for the entire runtime. I mean, you get some great actors in here doing some fucking crazy performances. Matthew McConaughey just goes off batshit crazy in this movie to the point where the first thing I thought of when I saw this, when I was like, people hate this movie? He's literally doing Nicolas Cage. When Nicolas Cage is in a bad movie, this is exactly what he does. And Matthew McConaughey just does the exact same thing. Renee Zellweger's in this movie. I mean, she does her part to the best that she can. There's like a weird government conspiracy trying to scare people, like using Leatherface to scare them, Illuminati type weird shit going on. You get so many different looks for Leatherface in this movie, including the one that is probably just trying to be a straight up woman in this one. It is just everything that's all over the place, and it's entertaining. To me, it's very funny, it's comical, it's probably the most batshit crazy movie in this entire bunch, and it does a bunch of weird shit, but I get enjoyment out of it. Alright, middle of the road for these 9 movies is number 5, and that is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. Now, this movie was way better than I anticipated. And this movie does one of the things that I love about a Leatherface character. He's big, he's hulking, and he is there to fuck shit up. And he is brutal in this movie at times. Right in the beginning, when you get the kickoff part where he breaks that guy's fucking wrist and shoves his own bone right in his throat. Loved it. The bus scene in this movie, which is where we finally get our first ever massacre in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. The bus scene was awesome. I loved every bit of that. I mean, you get to watch a bunch of people that are just so cringeworthy, that are so annoying. I'm gonna cancel you. Good luck with that. But the kills in that scene are awesome. And there's one spot in particular when he first starts off and he's cutting through some people. He literally stops because he wants to keep moving forward, and he picks up somebody's leg and throws it behind him. And it just made me laugh out loud. Like, it's just so weirdly funny. And parts I loved about it, he throws that fucking giant hammer and hits that chick in the chest, and she goes flying through the stairs. It's just little bits of humor in there. followed with a lot of carnage in the overall way that the movie ends. Obviously, they were setting up for more sequels that we're still awaiting patiently. Come on, get us a couple more bloody kills with this awesome character of Leatherface that you've created. It's by no means is it a masterpiece whatsoever, but I mean it's a perfectly passable Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, and it falls right dead center in the middle for me. All right, number 4. Number 4 is going to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And this one, when I watched it, I thought this was going to be higher on my list, because I absolutely love this movie. It is just so off the walls, goofy black comedy horror, which I love black comedies. And the character of Chop Top, he is just phenomenal in this movie. I love Bill Moseley in most of the roles he does, and he nails this one perfectly. Just that weird, oddball, fucking crazy family member type character. I really like the chef in this one, how he takes all the food over to the old chili competition, and he says it's in the meat. The meat's the most important part, which we all know is from human. And overall, the kills in this movie, they're not like over the top. It does have one great jump scare when you're at the radio station. And the character of Stretch, I like, but the reason why this did fall down to 4 for me is because her screaming in this movie just got grating on me so hard that at the point I wanted to be like, just shut the fuck up and kill her. Just shut her up. And most of the time it doesn't bother me when I watch this movie, but for some reason on this watch through, I really just got sick of listening to her scream. It may be because I watched a lot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, and holy shit do people scream excessively in these movies, but this one, it hit that one the hardest note there is, and I was just like, all right. And I sat down, it made it at 4. Number 3 for me is going to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Beginning, and this is a prequel, and I know a lot of people hate prequels out there. I mean, hell, Leatherface was a prequel, and that was number 9 for me, but I believe the fact that I liked the 2003 remake one a lot, and it brings back a lot of the same characters, and we get the origin stories on a lot of stuff, and I do actually like how all of that falls in place. I know a lot of people complain that we didn't need to know how he lost his legs, we didn't need to know how he lost his teeth. I say, fuck it. I like that whole part of the storyline. And this Leatherface, once he finally dons his little face that he cuts off and puts on, just looks insanely awesome. I even like the before look, kind of reminds you of Mankind from wrestling back in the day. I like that. I like how he's big, he's hulking, he's angry. Like I said, that's how I like my Leatherface, as a big, beastly dude who's just there to fuck shit up and bring carnage on. I find that to be the scariest versions of him. And this movie is probably the bloodiest, goriest Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie there is out there. And that falls at number 3. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you want to see more horror content and some more franchise rankings I'm going to have coming up. But now we're down to the final 2. And I will have to say, I am actually shocked to myself that I came down as these are the final 2. Because as you're going to see, part 2, or number 2 for me, is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I say that's shocking because I did not watch the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre until about 2 years ago. And I found that movie to be so boring. It just bored the shit out of me. And the frickin' screaming by Sally Hardesty in this movie just never ending. Shut the hell up is how I felt. But like I said, it's at number 2 now. And that's because on this rewatch that I just did recently, I got a completely different experience out of this movie. And I'm kind of shocked. Like, it didn't seem like it drug along. The acting in the movie I found to be actually very good and more realistic, when before I thought it was just bad acting. There is still Franklin, and Franklin is still the most annoying character, I think, in this entire series. He is just so fucking annoying. And when he dies, it's like, yes. But what I'll say with this movie is it's dirty, it's grungy, and it's going exactly what it's trying to do, and it nails it perfectly. There is a lot of tension in this movie. It's very psychological. And just everything that happens in this movie, it's just right. I don't know any other way to put it. Like, the dinner scene is awesome. When you see him smash that guy over the head, I laughed when I saw it. This was supposed to be a dark comedy from what Toby Hooper said, so I guess I got the point behind that one. But when he slams the door shut, all those iconic things that you think of with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the woman getting set up on that hook and it piercing through her back, and the low budget, and then knowing the story behind how they shot this in a house in Texas, it was 100 degrees. Most of the stuff they didn't have money for, so it's like carcasses and shit they found on the side of the road, they put inside this house, and they were smelling it, and people were throwing up in between takes and everything else. It was just a shit-ass movie to have to live through to make, but damn does it do what it's supposed to, and it did revolutionize horror, because we had not seen something of that type of realism and just depravity, and it spawned much more movies after that would try that attempt. And then even in the 2000s, we started to get a lot of movies that would go back to that style. And it's one of those things that, like, it doesn't hit as well maybe nowadays if you're a young person watching it. And that's how I felt. But it spun around and it did well for me. But that brings me to my number one. And for me, number one is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003. And I really can't say anything bad about this movie at all. It was the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that I watched. It made me think Leatherface was a badass slasher. I have seen many, many slashers all prior to this guy, and this guy was probably the scariest villain, character killer that I had seen on screen at that time. I mean, he was just a big, giant dude, just full of so much ferocity, and the kills that you get, it does, so the original did this great thing where they didn't do over-the-top blood and gore. They left it to your imagination for you to kind of know what's going on, and they didn't do the overshow. They showed just enough to get you there for you to finish the journey, and that was pretty awesome about the original movie. This one goes into effect where it's going to show you more than that does, but it still doesn't do the over-the-top gore like the beginning did. There's even a scene where he kills a girl, and she's laying on the ground. You just see him kind of put the chainsaw down in her, and like all these feathers are flying and stuff. It turns around and he's wearing, Jessica Biel's boyfriend's face on his mask, or face on his face. And it's just a very iconic looking scene. Emery Ermey in this movie is fantastic as the sheriff. I mean, he did good in both of the remake in the beginning, but in this movie, he is just fucking scary ass dude that you don't want to fuck with. And he plays that part perfectly where he's like, oh, the sheriff, and, he seems a little bit odd. And then you find out he's part of the family. And Jessica Biel's character goes on this huge arc. The only thing I'd say that kind of sucks about this movie, in a sense, is that a big portion of it is a lot of chase scenes, which the original had a long-ass chase scene through the woods. So it seems like it's kind of playing homage to that. But this one goes in a completely different direction almost as the original one does. And I just love the ending of it and how everything turned out. And this is my favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. So let me know in the comments down below, what is your ranking? What's your favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Is it blasphemy that I didn't put the 74 at the top because it is such an iconic horror movie? It's just not as rewatchable for me. Until the next one, guys, rest in peace.